Welcome to State of the Matrix, where we deconstruct the fabric of reality and consciousness. Here, we unravel illusions and dive deep into the hidden layers of existence. Join us on this continuous journey of awakening. In this video, I'll be discussing the views of the philosopher Schopenhauer, specifically the value of self-reliance and solitude. Schopenhauer valued self-reliance as a cornerstone of living an authentic and fulfilled life. He advocated for individuals to cultivate independence of thought and action, distancing themselves from external influences or distractions that could cloud judgment or character. To quote Schopenhauer, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free." Unfortunately, in the contemporary world, the complex interdependencies created by technology, urbanization, and globalization have reshaped how self-reliance is perceived and practiced. Today, large corporations and centralized governance, coupled with tightly integrated global supply chains, mean that individuals are often disconnected from the processes that support their lives, such as food production, energy, and resource management, thus rendering their lives more dependent than ever. This modern challenge to self-reliance raises questions about how individuals can reclaim independence in a world that often rewards convenience and conformity over resilience and self-determination. Moreover, from this perspective, individuals in the modern world may claim to be self-reliant, but only superficially so, failing to comprehend what self-reliance would look like outside a highly interconnected and technological society. Also, their valuing of solitude could well be due to the fact that they have so little of it due to the pressures of being forced out into the world in order to grind for their existence, or at least interface with it in a major way that detracts from their sense of solitude. Schopenhauer considered an interest in solitude to be rare, and that it takes dedication and a reconfiguration of the mind in order to grow accustomed to it and thrive in it. Most people seek the herd and get lost in, and dependent on social interactions and emotional experiences associated with what society has to offer socially, thus losing themselves and perhaps being unable to connect with their true nature, undermining their sense of self-reliance and any interest in solitude. Furthermore, due to the conditioning of society, many people bring these attitudes, roles, and identities into their time alone, which is a form of continued socialization, never really having the time or insight enough to wriggle out of these narrow views of the self provided by society. For example, an individual of a particular class and profession or trade may bring as many representations of their class and worldly affinity groups into their time alone as they are able in order to maintain their status merely to themselves. Schopenhauer would see this as detracting from their authenticity and the potential of their solitude. This resonates with transpersonal psychology and psychosynthesis, which I explored in the previous video, and its interest in helping people reconnect to their higher selves. Moreover, from a Buddhist and Hindu perspective, as far as states of consciousness are concerned, such a socialized intrusion into our private life would be considered superficial and a distraction from the essence of being. Worse than this, in a technological society replete with conditioning and propaganda, moments of solitude degrade to what could be called Pavlovian isolation, which facilitates further conditioning through rumination and the intrusion of propaganda into their private life via various types of media that they have an attachment to. In this instance, isolation allows conditioning of the mind and the brain to be amplified, which results in the individual taking this back out into public life and joining the herd, social referencing with those who follow suit and identifying with hostility those who deviate. This notion of Pavlovian isolation, as we will see, is at odds with what Schopenhauer and others were promoting with solitude. Schopenhauer's stance on authenticity through solitude points to his perception of society as a space that encourages pretense and superficiality by highlighting how modern structures, technology, media, and economics have intensified these pressures, subtly or overtly conditioning individuals to conform, thus eroding their authentic selves, subverting their potential by providing them with ready-made identities, spoon-fed values, perspectives, and opinions. The reliance on vast systems, combined with targeted propaganda and social conditioning, reinforces roles and expectations that align with societal norms or consumer-driven ideologies. This creates a situation where true self-awareness and authenticity is obscured for many, even to those attempting to live authentically, simply because of the pervasiveness of these external influences. In my view, authenticity needs a strong spiritual realignment with the higher self that becomes embodied in much of our life, and is equated with the Hindu term Atman, a pervasive and deep experience of the higher self that connects to the Brahman, the essence of the consciousness of existence. This can be done with an intuitively embodied awareness of the superficiality and conditioned nature of culturally available roles, attitudes, and identities. Disidentification and detachment facilitate an inner solitude, something that can be taken anywhere, even in crowded and highly socialized spaces and interpersonal relationships. Interestingly, across the Atlantic, Henry David Thoreau's book titled Walden, published in 1854, expresses themes of self-reliance and solitude like those explored by Schopenhauer. Thoreau spent about 2 years, from July 1845 to September 1847, living in a small cabin he built himself by Walden Pond near Concord, Massachusetts in the northeast of the USA. His experiences there inspired the writing of his book, in which he reflected on the value of living simply, close to nature, and independently, away from the influences of society. Although the work of Thoreau intersects with Schopenhauer's here, Thoreau was not directly influenced by him, as he was more deeply rooted in American transcendentalism, a movement that celebrated individualism, intuition, and a deep connection to nature. Thoreau's philosophical views were shaped by thinkers like Ralph Waldo Emerson, who emphasized self-reliance and personal integrity. He was also influenced greatly by Eastern religious texts, such as the Bhagavad Gita, which he read avidly. The Bhagavad Gita, it should be noted, is one of the primary Gitas, songs or scriptures, which is sometimes referred to merely as the Gita. Thoreau referenced these ideas in his writings, finding them inspirational in his philosophical reflections on nature, self-reliance, and transcendence, or spirituality and self-realization. To quote Thoreau, "In the morning, I bathe my intellect in the stupendous and cosmogonal philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, in comparison with which our modern world and its literature seem puny and trivial." While Thoreau and Schopenhauer both valued solitude and self-reliance, their approaches stem from different philosophical traditions. Schopenhauer was grounded in European pessimism and influenced by Buddhist thought, focusing more on human suffering and will. Interestingly, their shared themes of solitude and authenticity reveal a broader cross-cultural resonance that points to a common response to the pressures of societal conformity. To quote Schopenhauer, "If I were to take the results of my philosophy as the standard of truth, I would have to consider Buddhism the finest of all religion." This highlights Schopenhauer's deeply held affinity to Buddhism. Buddhist teachings on anatta, the non-self, and the idea that the true self is beyond individual identity aligns with Schopenhauer's views, who saw authenticity as a recognition of this truth. While Schopenhauer did not fully adopt Buddhism, his ideas reflected a deep sympathy for its core principles, especially in areas of solitude, authenticity, and freedom from desire. He saw Buddhism's focus on renouncing ego and worldly attachments as closely aligned with his own vision of achieving inner freedom and authenticity. If you're enjoying this video so far, please like and subscribe for more content like this. More broadly, the 19th century saw a growing fascination with diverse religious and philosophical perspectives, which greatly influenced spiritual and philosophical movements. Thinkers like Thoreau, Emerson, Schopenhauer, and even Nietzsche and many others were responding to profound shifts in society. Rapid urbanization, the Industrial Revolution, and technological advancements were reshaping life, often undermining traditional values that had once provided individuals with a sense of identity, community, and purpose. This period coincided with a philosophical awakening that looked beyond Western norms, seeking insights from Eastern traditions and often questioning mechanistic views of life, a reaction against the Industrial Revolution itself, which started in the 1790s in England and quickly spread to the USA with the advent of textile mills, a fascinating area you should take the time to look into if you haven't yet. This broadening interest can be seen as an attempt to address the alienation and loss of individuality brought on by the modern, industrialized world. There was a growing sense that self-reliance, solitude, and authenticity were being eroded under the pressures of a fast-developing, dehumanizing society. The environmental degradation of the Industrial Revolution should also be seen as having an impact on the human condition, as it undermines our sense of oneness with nature and our capacity to experience its beneficial qualities, which supports the human spirit and its flourishing, something recognized by transcendentalism. Although considerable environmental laws were developed, much still needs to be done as globalization has exported these issues as well. Additionally, it should be noted that the early stages of the Industrial Revolution were quite harsh for workers, and it became apparent early on that labor laws needed to be developed, which included child labor laws and safety laws. And from this, over the course of many decades, childhood education expanded and related laws developed. So although many reap the benefits of this today in many ways, at the time, it was existentially apparent that there were significant issues with industrialization and its implications for human agency, the human spirit, and how best to navigate these emerging trends individually and societally. Unfortunately, we are still struggling with these issues today, entailing that the Industrial Revolution is still unfolding and reforms are still required. In competitive markets, corporations often pursue strategies to maximize efficiency and profits, sometimes at the expense of workers' rights, wages, conditions, and the environment. This competitive drive also incentivizes corporations to exploit loopholes, outsource labor to lower wage regions with weaker labor laws, or automate tasks, further reducing labor costs. Despite regulatory reforms, corporations frequently adapt to these constraints, sometimes by lobbying for favorable legislation or by relocating to jurisdictions with weaker labor and environmental protections. While modern laws and worker advocacy can create a temporary balance, the fundamental pressures of market competition and profit maximization remain. Game theoretically, in competitive environments, whether ecological, economic, or social, entities that don't capitalize on these opportunities often risk falling behind. This competitive edge can extend from the natural world, where competing groups deplete shared resources like forests, to corporate strategies that manage human resources in a similar extractive, performance-driven way, which can be seen as a race to the bottom. An approach sometimes called stack ranking, or rank and yank, where the lowest performing employees are fired perhaps annually, even just before Christmas, pressures employees to meet performance metrics and fosters a culture of fear and competition. By setting annual turnover targets, companies can push workers to prioritize results at any cost, often resulting in burnout, reduced morale, and the dehumanization of the workforce. The timing of such terminations around significant moments, like the holiday season, underscores an approach that views employees as replaceable assets rather than fully fledged people, potentially putting them in financial peril in an expansive social structure that evidently requires money to survive and thrive. These practices persist partly because competitive pressures reward such efficiency tactics, but also because regulatory frameworks tend to lag behind in addressing nuanced forms of exploitation. Companies have become adept at adapting to regulations without necessarily changing their underlying practices, finding new loopholes, and bending policies to align with their goals. So, it's clear that these early responses to the Industrial Revolution are deeply pertinent to the human condition and are more relevant than ever. Moreover, the path towards authenticity and solitude is certainly helped by many of the influential thinkers of the 19th century, much of which connects to transpersonal psychology and Eastern spirituality in ways that provide profound insights into the human condition and a means by which to counter societal pressures that distract us from our higher self, authenticity, self-reliance, and solitude. Connectedness to our higher nature and consciousness comes with distancing ourselves and detaching from the technological society that seeks to saturate and commodify the body and the mind, often with little regard for our well-being, potential, and best interests. I should make one final point about solitude and connecting to others that is particularly important. Taken to the extreme, enduring literal solitude is a pipe dream for most, and as I've indicated, we can take inner solitude into public life as well. Furthermore, we should consider affinity groups and how they and their members can benefit each other on their quest. An affinity group in this area being discussed will share values and approaches and will provide vetted interactions that have a chance of being productive and beneficial to those involved. Affinity group members may be found in our local environments, though there could be few available, but also in more distributed settings and throughout history, such as those I've discussed in this video. By providing space for our affinity group, this allows for the consolidation and furtherance of the ambitions of the group to be met. Think about the benefits of affinity groups elsewhere. The most productivity occurs when we focus primarily on our affinity group, reducing the potential distractions, which at worst can be debilitating due to the potential of ridicule, or at least the harassment and debasement of ideas, interests, and productivity, which we shouldn't have to deal with and at some point detracts from or simply prevents the potential for progress. Although affinity groups can go badly wrong themselves, such as criminal organizations, with the right focus and values as discussed here, they can be incredibly productive and beneficial. Consider the movements of the past that we benefit from today. In every case, the protagonists formed their own, locally or aligned with existing affinity groups, which were perhaps further afield, yet allowed them to distill their ideas and practices, which ended up percolating through society and into the present. Remember that we are not alone, and our affinity groups can be found not only in this nexus dimension, but also at more refined levels of this stratified reality of the expression of consciousness. Thank you for watching, and remember to bring the benefits of solitude into your life, any way you can throughout the day, facilitating higher states of consciousness that transcend us from the lowly conditioning of society, and remembering that this is always available to us. Topics related to what I've discussed in this video will be covered more on this channel, so if you found this exploration interesting, hit like and subscribe, comment, and join us next time as we continue to explore consciousness and the nature of reality.